She was fired after the Mafia boss's fiancé accused her of stealing food, until he saw the footage. Meet Sarah, a young woman who had just landed a job as a maid at one of the most luxurious mansions in the city. The mansion was owned by Dominic Romano, a powerful and intimidating Mafia boss, whose empire stretched far and wide. Sarah had no idea what she was walking into when she accepted the position, but she was in desperate need of work. She had always been an honest person, raised with good values, and working hard to pay the bills. Little did she know, her life was about to change forever. Dominic's fiancée, Angela, was known for her beauty, but also for her sharp temper and controlling nature. She ran the household with an iron fist, and everyone, from the butlers to the maids, knew to stay out of her way. Angela was extremely protective of Dominic and didn't trust anyone, especially the staff, who she believed were only there for the money and power that came with working for someone like him. One evening, while Sarah was cleaning the kitchen, Angela accused her of stealing food. The accusation came out of nowhere. Sarah had just finished cleaning the pantry when Angela barged in, her eyes burning with anger. "I know what you've been doing," Angela sneered, pointing a finger at Sarah. "You've been stealing food from the kitchen, haven't you? I saw the leftovers in your bag earlier today. You think I didn't notice?" Sarah stood frozen, her heart racing. She had no idea what Angela was talking about. She hadn't taken anything. In fact, she had never even thought of it. The only thing she had was a small lunch she'd packed for herself that morning. But Angela wasn't listening. She was already calling for the head butler, demanding that Sarah be fired on the spot. "Pack your things and get out," Angela screamed, her voice echoing through the mansion's lavish halls. Sarah, too stunned to speak, gathered her belongings in silence, her mind racing. She couldn't believe this was happening. She had worked so hard to get here, and now, in an instant, it was all falling apart. As she was leaving the mansion, she heard the sound of footsteps behind her. She turned to see Dominic walking toward her. His expression was unreadable, but there was something in his eyes, an intensity she couldn't quite place. "Wait," he said, his deep voice carrying authority. "What's going on here?" Sarah opened her mouth to explain, but Angela immediately interrupted, her voice dripping with disdain. "She's been stealing food from the kitchen," Angela spat, her eyes blazing with fury. "I saw her with my own eyes. She's nothing but a thief." Dominic glanced at Sarah, then back at Angela. He seemed to be processing the situation, his gaze intense. Sarah could feel the tension in the air. She was about to lose her job, and worse, her reputation. But then, something surprising happened. Dominic turned to the head butler and ordered, "Show me the security footage from the kitchen." The butler nodded and quickly left to retrieve the footage. As Sarah stood there, heart pounding, she couldn't help but wonder if she would be able to prove her innocence. Would Dominic believe her? Would he understand that she had done nothing wrong? Just minutes later, the butler returned with the footage. Dominic watched it in silence, his expression unreadable. Sarah held her breath, hoping beyond hope that the truth would come out. As the footage played, it revealed something shocking. The video showed Sarah in the kitchen, but there was no evidence of her taking anything. In fact, the footage clearly showed Angela sneaking into the pantry and pocketing some of the leftover food. Sarah's heart skipped a beat as the truth was revealed. Dominic's face hardened as he watched the footage. He turned to Angela, his voice cold and commanding. "I suggest you explain yourself," he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. Angela's face turned bright red, and for a moment, she looked like she might explode. But Dominic didn't give her a chance. He turned to Sarah, his eyes softening. "I'm sorry you were caught in the middle of this," he said quietly. "I'm going to make sure you get your job back." Sarah could hardly believe what she was hearing. Dominic Romano, the feared Mafia boss, was defending her. The same man who ran a powerful empire, the one everyone feared, was now standing up for her. She felt a rush of relief wash over her, but also confusion. How could this be happening? She had just been humiliated, fired, and accused of something she hadn't done. But now, in an instant, everything had changed. Dominic's intervention had not only cleared her name, but also restored her dignity. "Angela," Dominic said, turning back to his fiancée, "I expect an apology, and I expect you to leave Sarah alone from now on." Angela, humiliated and defeated, had no choice but to comply. The entire situation had taken a dramatic turn, and it left everyone in the room stunned. But for Sarah, this was a new beginning. She had been given a second chance, one that would change her life forever. After the shocking turn of events, where Dominic Romano, the feared Mafia boss, cleared Sarah's name and restored her dignity, things seemed to return to normal, at least for a while. Sarah found herself back in the mansion, trying to regain some sense of stability. Her emotions were all over the place. One minute, she was on top of the world, feeling vindicated. The next minute, she was overwhelmed by the uncertainty of it all. She had no idea what her future held. Dominic had apologized to her, and she had been reinstated, but the tension between her and Angela was palpable. Every time Angela looked at Sarah, there was a flicker of resentment in her eyes. Sarah could feel it. She knew Angela hadn't forgotten what happened. She had seen the way Angela stormed off after Dominic's intervention, and Sarah could only imagine the anger brewing inside her. But it wasn't just Angela she had to worry about. The other staff members also treated her differently. Some gave her sympathetic looks, while others seemed more distant, as if they were unsure of where they stood. Sarah couldn't help but feel like an outsider in the very place she was supposed to feel at home. But despite all the tension, Sarah tried to keep her head down and focus on her work. She was determined not to let the drama affect her. She had been given a second chance, and she wasn't going to waste it. One evening, after finishing her cleaning duties in the kitchen, Sarah was walking down the grand hallway when she overheard voices coming from the living room. Curiosity got the better of her, and she slowed her pace, trying to stay out of sight. The voices were low, but she could make out Dominic's deep tone and Angela's sharp words. "I don't trust her, Dominic," Angela said, her voice trembling with anger. She was caught stealing. "I know it. I don't care what the footage showed. She was guilty. I know it in my gut." "You're wrong, Angela." Dominic's voice was calm but firm. "Sarah didn't steal anything. I've seen the footage. I've seen her work. She's trustworthy. You need to let it go." Sarah's heart raced as she pressed herself against the wall, hoping they wouldn't notice her. She wasn't supposed to be eavesdropping, but she couldn't help it. The conversation hit her like a punch to the stomach. She had thought that after Dominic had stepped in, things would calm down, but it seemed Angela was still holding on to her suspicions. "I can't let it go, Dominic," Angela insisted. "You don't understand. I feel like we're being taken advantage of. She's here to get close to you. That's what she's really after." Sarah's stomach churned. She had never once thought about getting close to Dominic in any way other than as a servant. She had never imagined that her hard work and honesty would be seen as a threat. As she quietly backed away from the door, she tried to keep her emotions in check. She knew she had to leave before they saw her. She didn't want to cause any more problems. But that night, as she lay in her small room, her mind raced. She couldn't help but wonder. If Dominic was the one person who believed in her, why did it feel like Angela's suspicions were starting to tear apart everything she had worked for? Over the next few days, things began to spiral. Angela's behavior grew more passive-aggressive. She would make snide remarks when Dominic wasn't around, casting doubt on Sarah's character. The other staff members followed suit, whispering behind her back, giving her cold stares when she passed by. Sarah tried her best to ignore it, focusing on her work and hoping things would settle. But then, late one night, as she was cleaning the dining room, she noticed something strange. The mansion was eerily quiet, the only sound being the soft click of her cleaning supplies as she moved about. She heard footsteps behind her. At first, she thought it was one of the other staff members, but when she turned around, her blood ran cold. Dominic was standing in the doorway, watching her with an unreadable expression. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then, Dominic finally broke the silence. "Sarah, can we talk?" His voice was calm, but there was something in it that made her heart skip a beat. She nodded, unsure of what he wanted to say. As he walked into the room, he gestured for her to sit. Sarah hesitated but obeyed. Dominic sat down across from her, his gaze steady. "I know things have been difficult between you and Angela," he began, his voice low. "But I want you to know that I'm on your side. I've been trying to get through to her, but she's stubborn. She won't listen." Sarah looked down at her hands, unsure of how to respond. She wanted to believe Dominic, but the tension between them was starting to feel overwhelming. "What do you mean?" she finally asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Dominic sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "Angela's not going to stop accusing you, and it's starting to affect the staff. I don't want you to feel like you have to keep dealing with this alone." Sarah's heart sank. "What are you saying?" she asked, barely able to meet his gaze. I'm saying, Dominic said, his voice firm, that I'll do whatever it takes to make sure you're treated fairly here. But I need to know you can handle it. This isn't just about you and Angela anymore. It's about the whole household. Sarah's mind raced. She wasn't sure what Dominic meant, but she knew one thing for sure. This situation wasn't over. The drama had only just begun. After their conversation that night, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling of unease that lingered in the air. Dominic had told her he was on her side, but as she walked through the mansion the next few days, it felt like the weight of suspicion was still hanging over her. Every glance from Angela seemed colder than before, every word laced with disdain. The other staff members whispered in hushed tones when Sarah passed by, and she couldn't escape the feeling that she was being watched constantly. Sarah tried to keep her head down, sticking to her duties. She continued cleaning, dusting, and organizing, doing her best to ignore the tension that swirled around her. But every time she caught sight of Angela, the feeling of dread crept up her spine. It was clear Angela hadn't given up on her suspicions, and Sarah knew she had to stay strong if she wanted to keep her job. One afternoon, as Sarah was cleaning the drawing room, she overheard a heated conversation between Angela and Dominic. She didn't mean to eavesdrop, but the door was slightly ajar, and the voices were unmistakably loud. She's dangerous, Dominic. Angela's voice was tight with anger. She's only here to get close to you. I can't trust her. Sarah's heart pounded in her chest. She held her breath, hoping they wouldn't notice her. I've told you 1,000 times, Angela. Dominic's voice was calm but firm. She's just a maid. And she's not like you think. She's honest. She's hardworking. But you don't see it, do you? Angela retorted. She's playing you. You're too blind to see it. Sarah's stomach turned as the words cut deep. Angela had been relentless in her accusations, and now it seemed like she was pushing Dominic to question Sarah's loyalty. Sarah didn't know how much more of this she could take. She felt like a pawn in a game she didn't understand, trapped between two people, one who defended her and one who wanted to destroy her. Just then, Sarah heard Dominic's footsteps approaching. She quickly wiped her hands on her apron and turned to face him, trying to act natural. Sarah. Dominic's voice was serious but not unkind. Can I talk to you for a moment? Sarah nodded, her heart beating faster. Of course, Mr. Romano. They walked into the hallway, away from the prying ears of Angela and the others. I know things have been tense, Dominic started, his gaze steady. I know Angela isn't making this easy, but I want you to know that I trust you. I'm going to do whatever it takes to make sure you're treated fairly here. I won't let her drive you out. Sarah's relief was palpable, but there was still a nagging doubt in her mind. Thank you, Mr. Romano. I just don't want to cause any more trouble. You're not the problem, Sarah. The problem is Angela's paranoia, he said, his voice lowering as if speaking the truth aloud would make it more real. I've already spoken to the staff about treating you with respect. I know this is difficult, but I'm going to make sure you're safe here. Dominic's words were meant to reassure, but they didn't quiet the storm brewing inside Sarah. Every day that passed in the mansion felt like a ticking time bomb. She was constantly walking on eggshells, trying to avoid Angela's wrath and the disapproving looks of the other staff. The longer she stayed, the more she felt the strain. That night, as Sarah was finishing up her shift, she noticed a figure standing in the doorway of the kitchen. It was Angela. Sarah froze, not sure what to expect. Angela's eyes were narrowed, her expression icy. I know what you're doing, Angela said, her voice low and menacing. You think Dominic's going to protect you? Think again. He's not going to save you when everyone finds out what you're really up to. Sarah stood tall, refusing to let fear show on her face. I don't know what you're talking about, Angela. I'm just here to do my job. Angela stepped closer, her voice lowering to a whisper. You're not fooling anyone. You're nothing but a thief, and I'll make sure everyone knows it. Sarah's heart raced, but she refused to back down. If you have something to say it to Dominic. I'm not the one who's guilty here. Angela's lips curled into a twisted smile. You'll see, she said, her voice dripping with malice. You'll see how quickly everything can fall apart. With that, she turned on her heel and walked out, leaving Sarah standing there, her thoughts a whirlwind of confusion and fear. The next few days were a blur of tension and uncertainty. Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to happen, something that would change everything. She was right. One evening, after everyone had gone to bed, Sarah was in the kitchen, cleaning up for the night. As she finished up, she heard the familiar sound of footsteps approaching. She turned to find Dominic standing in the doorway, his face hard with determination. "Sarah," he said, his voice grave. "There's something you need to know. Angela has been spreading lies about you. She's been telling the staff that you're a thief and that you've been stealing from the kitchen. I've had enough of this. I'm going to confront her, and I want you to be there. This instant tonight." Sarah's heart skipped a beat. This was it, the moment she had been dreading. She wasn't sure what would happen next, but she knew one thing. Everything was about to change. The tension in the mansion had reached a breaking point. Sarah knew the time for hiding in the shadows was over. Dominic had made it clear that it was time to confront Angela. Tonight, everything would come to a head. As Sarah walked through the mansion's grand hallway, the air felt thick with anticipation. She could feel the weight of Dominic's words lingering in the air. It wasn't just about clearing her name anymore. This was about taking control of her future. She couldn't let Angela keep casting a shadow over her life. When Sarah reached the living room, she found Dominic already there, standing tall with a determined look on his face. His posture was commanding, and even though his face was stoic, Sarah could see the resolve in his eyes. This was the moment they would finally put an end to Angela's accusations. Dominic motioned for Sarah to sit, and he took the seat opposite her. "Are you ready?" he asked, his voice calm, but with an edge of intensity. "This has gone on long enough. You don't deserve to live in fear of being accused. I'm not letting Angela destroy your reputation." Sarah nodded, her heart racing. She felt a mixture of nerves and relief. Part of her wanted to run, to hide from the confrontation, but she knew it was time to face Angela. She had nothing to fear anymore. Dominic stood and walked toward the door, his steps echoing in the silent room. "Stay here. I'll bring Angela in," he said, and before Sarah could respond, he was gone. As Sarah waited, her mind raced. The quiet of the room felt suffocating, but she reminded herself that this was her chance. She wasn't going to let Angela's manipulations control her life any longer. A few minutes later, Dominic returned, and to Sarah's surprise, Angela was with him. Angela's face was a mask of fury, her lips twisted in a tight line. It was clear she wasn't happy about this confrontation. "You wanted to see me, Dominic?" Angela's voice was sharp, her eyes flicking to Sarah with barely concealed disdain. "I'm not sure what you think this is going to solve." Dominic's eyes were unyielding as he looked at Angela. "This ends tonight," he said firmly. "We've been through this over and over, Angela. I'm done letting you make baseless accusations against Sarah. We're going to get to the bottom of this once and for all." Angela scoffed, folding her arms. "I don't need to explain myself," she said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "I know what I saw. I know she's been stealing from us." Dominic's gaze hardened. "You saw nothing, Angela. And I've already seen the footage. There's no evidence. Nothing happened." Angela's face turned a shade of red, and her eyes narrowed. "You think I'm lying?" she demanded, her voice rising. "She's been taking things right under your nose, Dominic. You're too blinded by your little maid to see the truth." Sarah's heart pounded as she listened to Angela's accusations. It was like déjà vu, Angela repeating the same words over and over again, trying to plant doubt in Dominic's mind. But Sarah wasn't going to let her win this time. "I haven't stolen anything," Sarah said quietly, her voice steady despite the rush of emotions inside her. "I'm here to work. That's all." Angela whipped her head toward Sarah, her eyes flashing with anger. "You don't get to speak," Angela spat. "You're nothing but a servant here. You're lucky Dominic hasn't tossed you out on the street yet." Sarah stood up, not backing down. She looked straight into Angela's eyes, unflinching. "You can't bully me anymore. I'm not going anywhere." Dominic stepped forward, his presence commanding the room. "Enough," he said, his voice ringing out. "Angela, this behavior stops now. I'm done letting you tear this household apart with your jealousy and paranoia." For a moment, there was silence. Angela looked as though she was about to explode, but instead, she clenched her fists and stormed out of the room, leaving Dominic and Sarah alone. The tension in the room melted away as the door slammed behind her. Dominic turned to Sarah, his expression softening. "I'm sorry you had to deal with that," he said quietly. "You didn't deserve any of it." Sarah looked up at him, a sense of gratitude swelling in her chest. "Thank you," she whispered. "I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't stepped in." Dominic gave her a reassuring smile. "You don't have to thank me. This was the right thing to do." For the first time in what felt like forever, Sarah allowed herself to feel a small sense of relief. The battle wasn't over, but she had won the first round. The storm was far from finished, but for now, she had Dominic's support. And that meant more than anything. As Sarah walked out of the room, she felt a renewed sense of hope. The weight on her shoulders had been lifted, and for the first time in days, she could breathe freely. Whatever came next, she was ready to face it. She had already proven that she wouldn't let anyone, not even Angela, take away her dignity. She was stronger than she had ever known, and now, she had the chance to finally live without fear. After the confrontation with Angela, Sarah thought things might finally settle down, but she soon realized that peace was still a distant dream. Dominic had tried to reassure her, but as the days went by, the tension in the mansion was far from over. Sarah had earned Dominic's trust, but Angela's presence still loomed large. Every time Sarah walked through the mansion, she could feel Angela's eyes on her, cold and judging. Angela hadn't been one to back down easily. It wasn't long before the whispers started again among the staff. Despite Dominic's intervention, the damage had already been done. Angela's manipulation had left a mark, and Sarah could sense the divide between the staff members. Some were on her side, but others, like the head housekeeper, still eyed her with suspicion. The strain was beginning to wear on Sarah. She couldn't keep living in fear of Angela's wrath or the silent hostility of the other staff members. She had to find a way to make peace with the situation. But how could she when Angela was still undermining her at every turn? One evening, as Sarah was finishing up her shift in the kitchen, she found herself face to face with Angela once again. This time, Angela wasn't yelling or accusing her outright. She was eerily calm, her expression cold and calculating. "I hope you realize, Sarah, that you're nothing more than a pawn in this game," Angela said, her voice low and venomous. "You think Dominic will protect you? You think he's going to save you from the truth?" Sarah's stomach tightened, but she refused to show weakness. "I've done nothing wrong, Angela, and Dominic believes me. That's all that matters." Angela smirked, her eyes glinting with malice. "You think that's enough? You think you can win his favor with your fake innocence? You're nothing, Sarah. You'll never be one of us." Sarah's pulse quickened, but she stood her ground. "I don't need to be one of you," she said firmly. "I'm here to do my job. Nothing more, nothing less." Angela took a step closer, her presence suffocating. "You're wrong," she whispered. "You'll never belong here. I'll make sure of it." Sarah could feel the weight of Angela's words hanging in the air, but she refused to back down. She had come this far, and she wasn't going to let Angela destroy everything she had worked for. Just as Sarah was about to turn away, Angela's voice stopped her. "You're lucky Dominic is so blinded by you," Angela said, her tone dripping with disdain. "But don't think for a second that I won't expose you for who you really are." Sarah's heart raced. "What are you talking about?" she asked, her voice trembling despite herself. "You'll see," Angela said, her lips curling into a wicked smile. "I'll make sure everyone knows the truth about you." With that, Angela turned and walked out, leaving Sarah standing in the kitchen, her mind racing with fear and confusion. The threat Angela had made hung heavily in the air. What was she planning? Sarah couldn't help but wonder if this was the beginning of the end. The next few days were a blur of uncertainty. Sarah tried to focus on her work, but every moment felt like she was walking on a tightrope, balancing between Angela's wrath and Dominic's protection. She couldn't escape the feeling that something was about to break. Then, one afternoon, the storm finally came. Sarah was in the laundry room, sorting through linens, when she heard footsteps approaching. She looked up, only to see the head housekeeper standing in the doorway, her expression grave. "Sarah, you need to come with me," the head housekeeper said, her voice low. "Now." Sarah's stomach dropped. She had no idea what was happening, but she knew it couldn't be good. "What's going on?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Just follow me," the head housekeeper replied, turning on her heel and walking briskly down the hallway. Sarah followed, her heart pounding in her chest. They walked through the mansion's grand corridors, past rooms she had cleaned 100 times before, until they reached Dominic's office. The door was slightly ajar. Sarah's mind raced. Why was she being brought here? Was Dominic involved in this? The head housekeeper knocked once before entering, and Sarah followed her into the room. Dominic was sitting at his desk, his expression unreadable. Angela was standing beside him, her arms crossed, her face triumphant. "Sarah," Dominic said, his voice calm but firm. "I need to talk to you about something." Sarah's heart skipped a beat. This didn't sound good. What is it? She asked, her voice shaky. Angela has come to me with new evidence, Dominic said, his eyes locking onto hers. She claims that you've been taking more than just food. She says she's seen you stealing from the safe. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. This was it. Angela was trying to frame her again. That's a lie, Sarah exclaimed, her voice rising in desperation. I've never stolen anything. I don't even know where the safe is. Angela stepped forward, her expression smug. I've seen you, Sarah. You think I don't know what you're up to? Enough, Angela. Dominic's voice was sharp. He stood up from his desk, his face hardening. I've heard enough of these lies. If you have real proof, show it. But I'm not going to let you destroy Sarah's life over your paranoia. Angela's face twisted with rage, but she didn't say another word. Dominic turned back to Sarah, his gaze softening. I'm sorry you had to go through this, he said quietly. But I'm putting an end to it once and for all. I'm going to make sure this doesn't happen again. Sarah stood there, her heart still pounding in her chest. She couldn't believe what she had just heard. But Dominic's words were a relief. For the first time in days, she felt like maybe, just maybe, she could breathe again. The following days after the intense confrontation between Dominic, Sarah, and Angela felt like a strange mix of tension and relief. Sarah had finally gotten some breathing room, but she knew that Angela's jealousy and manipulative nature weren't going to vanish overnight. The mansion had returned to a semblance of normalcy, but the atmosphere was thick with unspoken words. Sarah couldn't help but notice that the staff's behavior had shifted. Some were warm towards her, others were cold. But one thing was clear. The story Angela had spun had left its mark, and the people who once greeted her with kindness were now hesitant, wary. Dominic had promised to protect her, but Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that Angela's schemes weren't over yet. Every day, she kept her head down, staying focused on her tasks, trying not to draw too much attention to herself. But it wasn't easy. One afternoon, as Sarah was polishing the grand chandelier in the living room, she caught a glimpse of Angela in the hallway. Angela's eyes were narrow, and her lips were curled into a tight smile. Sarah's stomach twisted. She knew that look. It was the look of someone planning something. Before Sarah could turn away, Angela spoke, her voice dripping with venom. Still hanging around here, I see, she said, walking closer with slow, deliberate steps. You're not as safe as you think, you know. Sarah tried to ignore the malicious tone in Angela's voice, but it was impossible. I'm here to work, Angela. Nothing more, nothing less, she replied, keeping her voice steady. You're so naive, Angela sneered, glancing over Sarah's shoulder to make sure no one was watching. You think Dominic is going to protect you forever? You think he's the only one who matters here? I'm not done with you. Not by a long shot. Sarah's heart skipped a beat. She could feel the weight of Angela's words, but she refused to let fear take over. She couldn't afford to show any weakness. You can try, Angela, but I'm not going anywhere, she said firmly, meeting her gaze without flinching. Angela stepped back, her expression twisting into one of contempt. We'll see about that, she said before turning and walking away. Sarah's hands trembled as she wiped down the chandelier, her mind racing. What did Angela mean? Was she going to do something to undermine Sarah again? The tension had been building for weeks, and Sarah could feel it in the air. The mansion had once felt like a place of opportunity, but now it felt like a trap. That evening, as Sarah was walking to her room after her shift, she overheard voices in the hallway. She froze, straining to hear. It was Dominic and Angela, and they were speaking in hushed tones, but Sarah could still make out the words. I'm done with this, Dominic, Angela was saying, her voice low but seething. She's still here, acting like nothing happened. You've let her get away with everything. Dominic's voice was calm but firm. I've told you before, Angela. Sarah hasn't done anything wrong, and I'm not going to listen to these accusations anymore. You're blind, Angela spat. She's using you. She's trying to get close to you. She's not what she seems. Sarah's chest tightened. She had never wanted to be close to Dominic in that way, and the thought that Angela believed she had some hidden agenda was maddening. Enough, Dominic snapped. I don't want to hear this anymore. There was a brief silence before Angela's voice broke through again. Fine, she said bitterly. But remember, Dominic, I warned you. She'll tear everything apart if you let her. Sarah could hear Dominic exhale in frustration, and then the conversation stopped. She stood frozen in the hallway, her heart racing. Was this the breaking point? Would Angela finally do something to get rid of her? The next morning, Sarah was summoned to Dominic's office. As she walked in, she found him standing by the window, looking out at the sprawling estate. He turned to face her as she entered, his expression unreadable. "Sarah," he said, his voice steady but serious. "I've heard what's been going on. I'm not going to let this continue." Sarah's stomach tightened. "What do you mean?" she asked. Dominic's eyes softened, and he motioned for her to sit. "Angela has been spreading lies about you again. She's even gone as far as to tell the staff you've been stealing from me. I've heard it all, and I'm done with it." Sarah blinked in disbelief. "But I haven't taken anything. I don't know how to make her stop." "You don't have to," Dominic said. "I'm going to deal with this once and for all." He paused for a moment, his gaze steady. "I'll make sure she understands that this is over. You've proven your loyalty and your honesty, and I won't allow anyone, especially Angela, to tear you down." Sarah felt a wave of relief wash over her, but there was still a part of her that feared what Angela might do next. "What if she doesn't stop?" she asked, her voice shaky. Dominic's expression hardened. "She will stop. I'm putting an end to this, Sarah. You have my word." As he spoke, there was a sense of finality in his tone. Sarah couldn't help but feel grateful. Dominic had stood up for her once again. He wasn't going to let Angela continue her campaign of lies. For the first time in what felt like forever, Sarah felt a sense of peace. The battle wasn't over, but she knew she wasn't alone in it. Whatever came next, she was ready. She had Dominic's trust, and that meant everything. The next few days felt like a shift had occurred in the mansion, but it wasn't the peace Sarah had hoped for. Despite Dominic's reassurances, the atmosphere was still thick with uncertainty. Sarah had seen the look in Angela's eyes after their last confrontation. Angela was not one to back down, and Sarah knew she would continue to cause trouble if left unchecked. The tension between them was palpable, but this time, Sarah wasn't afraid. She had Dominic's trust, and that was more than enough to keep her going. As the days passed, Sarah returned to her usual routine. She focused on her work, doing what she was hired to do. The mansion was as grand as ever, the silence of the hallways only broken by the sound of her footsteps. She worked long hours, always aware of the eyes that followed her, the whispers that followed every step she took. But no matter how much the other staff members tried to avoid her or cast judgment, Sarah remained determined. She was not going to let anyone, not even Angela, push her out. It was one evening, just as Sarah was finishing her duties, that she found herself once again face to face with Angela. This time, Angela didn't come at her with accusations. Instead, she stood there, her arms crossed, a cold smile on her lips. "You think you've won, don't you?" Angela asked, her voice sharp but oddly calm. "What do you mean?" Sarah asked, trying to keep her voice steady. Angela laughed, the sound cold and mirthless. "You're still here, still working for Dominic. But don't think for a second that I've forgotten what you've done." "What I've done?" Sarah's pulse quickened. "You think you can just sweep everything under the rug because Dominic's standing by you?" Angela's voice grew more venomous. "You're nothing but a servant. He'll tire of you, just like he does with everyone else." Sarah's heart pounded in her chest, but she refused to show fear. "I haven't done anything wrong, Angela. I'm here to work, nothing more." Angela's eyes narrowed, her smile turning more sinister. "You may have Dominic's trust now, but that won't last forever. And when it's gone, you'll be back where you started, nothing." With that, Angela turned and walked away, leaving Sarah standing there, her mind spinning. Sarah felt a knot form in her stomach as the words echoed in her mind. She had Dominic's trust, but for how long? Angela's words were poison, and though Sarah tried to ignore them, they burrowed into her thoughts. What if Angela was right? What if Dominic grew tired of her? She couldn't afford to lose him, not after everything she had been through. That night, as Sarah lay in her small room, her thoughts were clouded with doubt. She had always prided herself on being strong, on standing up for herself, but Angela's words made her question everything. She had no choice but to push the thoughts aside and focus on the task ahead. The next morning, Sarah found herself in the kitchen early, preparing breakfast. The mansion was quiet, most of the staff still in their rooms or beginning their duties. As Sarah moved about, she heard the sound of footsteps approaching. She turned, her heart sinking when she saw Angela standing in the doorway. "I'm not done with you yet," Angela said, her tone cold and malicious. "I have something planned that will make sure you're out of here for good." Sarah's heart raced. What do you mean? You'll see, Angela said with a wicked smile. I have my ways of making sure you'll regret ever stepping foot in this house. Angela turned and walked away, leaving Sarah frozen in place. What was Angela planning? What could she do this time to drive Sarah out of the mansion? The rest of the day passed in a blur. Sarah tried to shake off the fear that had taken root in her mind, but it was hard to ignore the nagging feeling that something was coming. It wasn't until later that evening, when Sarah was cleaning the library, that she received her answer. Dominic entered the room, his presence filling the space as he approached her. Sarah, he said, his voice serious. There's something I need to talk to you about. Sarah looked up, her heart sinking. Was this it? Was he about to tell her that Angela had won, that she was being sent away? What's going on? She asked her, voice barely above a whisper. Dominic's expression softened, and he motioned for her to sit. Angela has been making more accusations, he said, his tone grave. She's trying to convince the staff that you're stealing again, but I won't let her ruin everything. Sarah's stomach churned. I haven't taken anything, Dominic, she said, her voice shaking. I know, he replied, his gaze steady. I trust you, Sarah. But Angela is relentless, and I need to do something about it. I won't let her destroy your reputation. Sarah felt a rush of gratitude wash over her. Dominic was standing by her once again, just like he had promised. What are you going to do? She asked. Dominic's eyes hardened. I'm going to confront Angela. I've had enough of this. You've proven your loyalty, and it's time she understood that. Sarah nodded, her heart swelling with appreciation. She couldn't believe how much Dominic had done for her. He wasn't just protecting her, he was fighting for her. That night, Dominic kept his word. He called Angela to his office, and for the first time, he laid down the law. Sarah didn't hear the details of the conversation, but when she saw Angela leave the office later, her face was pale, her shoulders slumped. It was over. Dominic had taken control. Sarah's relief was overwhelming. She had fought hard for her place in the mansion, and now, thanks to Dominic, it was hers for good. The days after Dominic's confrontation with Angela were strange. The mansion, once filled with tension, seemed quieter, more still. For the first time in weeks, Sarah could almost breathe again without feeling the constant weight of suspicion hanging over her. Angela, for all her attempts to manipulate, had been defeated, for now. Dominic's word was final. He had made sure that Sarah's reputation was cleared, and Angela's lies had been exposed. The staff, who had once given Sarah side glances and whispered behind her back, now seemed to treat her with a little more respect. Still, the undercurrent of animosity remained, but Sarah didn't let it bother her. She focused on her work and took comfort in the fact that she had finally earned Dominic's trust. She knew Angela wouldn't give up so easily, but for now, Sarah was safe. As the days passed, Sarah noticed Dominic was more present around the mansion. He made small talk with her. During breakfast, asking how her day was going or if she needed anything. There was something about the way he spoke to her now, something that made her heart flutter despite her best efforts to keep it under control. She had never imagined Dominic would be someone she'd confide in, but as time went on, she found herself enjoying the moments they shared. One evening, after a particularly long day of cleaning, Sarah found herself in the library, organizing books. She had always enjoyed the quiet solitude of the library, where the only sound was the rustle of pages turning. As she was reaching for a dusty old book on the top shelf, she heard a familiar voice. I thought I might find you here. Sarah turned to see Dominic standing in the doorway, his posture relaxed, but his expression unreadable. What brings you to the library? She asked, trying to sound casual, though her heart was racing. Dominic smiled slightly as he stepped inside. I thought we could talk, he said, his voice low. I've noticed you've been working hard lately. I wanted to make sure everything was going okay. Sarah's pulse quickened. There was something in his voice that made her feel uneasy, but in a good way. I'm doing fine, just a bit tired, she replied, looking down at her hands. I appreciate your concern, though. Dominic took a step closer, his eyes studying her carefully. Sarah, I want to make sure you understand something. What happened with Angela? It's over. I won't let anyone make you feel less than what you are. Sarah looked up, meeting his gaze for the first time in days. There was sincerity in his eyes that made her feel vulnerable, as if he could see through her defenses. Thank you, Dominic. I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't stepped in. Dominic's gaze softened. I've been watching you, Sarah. I see how hard you work, how dedicated you are. You deserve more than just to be here, cleaning and doing chores. You deserve respect. Sarah felt her breath catch in her throat. No one had ever spoken to her like this before. The sincerity in Dominic's words left her speechless. For a moment, she didn't know what to say. But then, without thinking, she blurted, I don't want to be just someone you tolerate. I want to be someone who means something. Dominic's eyes darkened slightly, and for a moment, Sarah thought she might have crossed a line. But instead of backing away, he stepped closer. You already mean something, he said quietly. The words hung in the air between them. Sarah's heart was pounding now, and she realized how much she had come to rely on his presence. He wasn't just the boss of the mansion. He was someone she felt connected to in a way she hadn't expected. As they stood there in the dim light of the library, something shifted. Dominic reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her face. I won't let anyone hurt you again, Sarah, he said, his voice low and reassuring. I'll protect you, no matter what. Sarah's breath caught in her throat as she looked up at him, unsure of what to say. The words seemed so simple, yet they held so much weight. Could she truly trust him? Could she really believe that he was here for her, not just as the Mafia boss, but as someone who cared? Before she could respond, Dominic took another step closer, closing the distance between them. The space that had once felt comfortable and professional now felt charged, as if everything was about to change. I've been thinking a lot about you, Sarah, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I know this is complicated, but I want to be honest with you. I care about you. The words took Sarah by surprise, and for a moment, she didn't know how to react. She had been so focused on surviving, on making it through each day, that she hadn't stopped to consider what she was truly feeling. But now, standing there with Dominic so close, it was hard to deny the connection she felt. Her heart raced as she looked up at him, unsure of what the future held, but certain of one thing. Things were about to change. Sarah's mind raced, but all she could do was nod, her emotions too overwhelming to articulate. Dominic's hand reached out, gently taking hers, and in that moment, Sarah knew that whatever came next, she wouldn't have to face it alone. They were no longer just the boss and his maid. There was something more between them now, something that neither of them could ignore. And for the first time in a long time, Sarah allowed herself to feel hope. After the night in the library, Sarah couldn't stop thinking about what had transpired between her and Dominic. For the first time, he had shown her a side of him she never expected, vulnerability, honesty, and a willingness to protect her. That night, as she lay in her small room, her heart raced as she replayed their conversation over and over again. Could this be real? Or was she just a pawn in his world, something he was obligated to care for because of his status? It was hard to imagine, but a small part of her allowed herself to believe in what she felt in that moment. Things between them were changing, and Sarah couldn't deny the spark that was there. Yet, with every passing day, there was still a sense of caution she couldn't shake. Despite the comfort she found in Dominic's words, Sarah couldn't forget the lingering presence of Angela. She had been silent since their last confrontation, but Sarah knew it wouldn't last long. Angela was too dangerous, too calculating to give up so easily. As the weeks went by, Sarah noticed subtle shifts in the mansion. The other staff members treated her with more respect, but some still whispered behind her back. Sarah kept her distance from the rumors, determined to not let them affect her. Dominic had promised to protect her, but she could feel the weight of the mansion's politics on her shoulders. It wasn't long before the calm that had settled in was shattered. One evening, as Sarah was finishing up her chores, she heard the sound of footsteps approaching. She turned, surprised to see Dominic walking toward her. His expression was unreadable, and there was a tension in his steps that immediately set off alarms in her mind. Sarah, can we talk? He asked, his voice low. Sarah's heart skipped a beat. She could tell something was wrong. Of course, she replied, trying to sound calm, though her nerves were getting the better of her. They walked into the quiet hallway, away from the prying eyes of the other staff. Dominic looked at her, his face serious. There's something you need to know, he began, his voice even, but with an edge of concern. Angela, she's planning something. She's been spreading lies again, not just to the staff, but to people who could do real damage. Sarah's heart dropped. She had expected this moment, but it didn't make it any easier. What kind of lies? She asked, trying to keep her voice steady. Dominic exhaled slowly. She's been telling people you've been working with others against me. She's trying to make it seem like you're plotting something behind my back. I don't know where she's getting these ideas, but she's dangerous. And she's working with people who could hurt us. Sarah felt the blood drain from her face. I haven't done anything like that, Dominic. You know I would never. Dominic placed a hand on her shoulder, his gaze softening. I know, Sarah. I know. But Angela has a way of turning the truth, twisting it. I won't let her destroy you. Sarah's mind was spinning. What should we do? She asked, fear creeping into her voice. I need you to be strong. Keep doing your job. Don't let her get to you. I'm going to confront her, but it has to be done carefully. If I go after her too directly, she'll make it worse. Sarah nodded, trying to process everything. I can't lose this job, Dominic. I can't go back to the way things were before. Dominic's eyes softened as he looked at her. You won't lose it. I'll handle this. Just keep your head down for now. We're in this together. As Dominic walked away, Sarah stood frozen, trying to wrap her mind around everything he had just told her. Angela had allies now. She wasn't just a nuisance to be ignored. The stakes had been raised. That night, Sarah couldn't sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Angela's smug face, heard her cold words echoing in her mind. She was coming for Sarah again, and this time, it wouldn't be as simple as confronting her. Angela wasn't just a jealous fiancée anymore. She was a threat. The next day, Sarah noticed that the atmosphere in the mansion had shifted again. The staff was quieter, more guarded. Whispers that had once been about her now seemed to be about something bigger, more dangerous. She couldn't help but feel like she was walking on a razor's edge, afraid that any wrong move could send everything crashing down. It wasn't until the evening that the true weight of the situation hit. Dominic summoned her to his office. His expression was hard, but there was a sense of urgency in the way he spoke. Sarah, I've just spoken to the people Angela has been working with, he said, his voice grim. They're making threats, serious ones. I've arranged for extra security. I need you to stay out of sight for a while. We have to handle this carefully. Sarah's heart raced. What do you mean, stay out of sight? She asked, her voice trembling. You need to stay in your room. Keep a low profile. I'll make sure you're safe, but we need to move fast. Dominic's words left no room for argument. Sarah nodded, but inside, a sense of dread began to settle. She had been trying to keep her head down, but now it seemed like everything was spiraling out of control. The one thing she knew for sure was that she wasn't going to back down. Whatever happened next, she would fight to keep her place in the mansion. She wasn't going to let Angela win. As Sarah sat in her room, her thoughts swirled. Dominic's plan to protect her, to keep her safe, had been set in motion, but the danger still loomed. Angela was ruthless, and now Sarah was trapped in a world where trust was fragile and every step felt like it could be her last. The mansion felt different now. It was as if the walls themselves were closing in on her, filled with secrets and whispers. The staff, though mostly respectful, still cast wary glances her way. She couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched, monitored, as if everyone expected her to slip up. And Angela, Sarah knew Angela would never stop scheming. The next few days passed in a haze of tension and uncertainty. Sarah kept to herself, staying in her room when she wasn't working, avoiding confrontation, and trying to stay out of the way. She was, for all intents and purposes, under lockdown, hidden from the world outside. It wasn't easy. The loneliness weighed on her, but she trusted Dominic. He was doing everything he could to keep her safe. The extra security had been a relief, but Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to happen. Then, late one evening, Sarah's suspicions were confirmed. She was finishing her shift, cleaning up the kitchen, when she heard footsteps behind her. She turned around, expecting to see one of the staff members, but instead, it was Dominic. His face was tense, his eyes scanning the room as though expecting danger at every turn. Sarah, he said, his voice low. There's been a situation. Her heart skipped a beat. What happened? She asked, trying to keep her voice steady. Dominic glanced toward the door, as if making sure no one else was listening. Angela made her move, he said, his tone serious. She's trying to turn the staff against you, and she's getting close. She's been making accusations about you again, saying you're sabotaging everything. Sarah's blood ran cold. What kind of accusations? She asked, her voice shaking slightly. Dominic's gaze hardened. She's claiming you've been stealing from the safe, spreading lies to the staff. She's trying to make it seem like you're after my position, after everything I've built. She's gone too far this time. Sarah's mind raced. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. This is insane, she whispered, struggling to grasp the gravity of the situation. I've never stolen anything from you, Dominic. I don't want any part of your empire. Dominic nodded, his expression unwavering. I know, Sarah. I know. But Angela's determined to destroy you. She'll stop at nothing to ruin you, and she's already started. The weight of his words hung heavy in the air. Sarah's stomach twisted in knots. She felt helpless, but she knew she couldn't back down. She had come so far. She wasn't about to let Angela tear it all away. What do we do? Sarah asked, trying to gather her thoughts. Dominic stepped closer, his hand gently resting on her shoulder. We're going to confront her, but we have to do it carefully. We can't give her the satisfaction of seeing us fall apart. I'll make sure she understands that I won't tolerate her lies anymore. Sarah nodded, though a wave of anxiety washed over her. She wasn't sure how much more she could take. But Dominic was right. She had to stand strong. The next day, Dominic made good on his promise. He called Angela into his office, and for the first time, he didn't hold back. Sarah wasn't sure what was said during their conversation, but she could tell by the way Dominic walked out of the office afterward that he had taken control of the situation. Angela had been silenced, at least for now. Dominic's voice rang in her ears as he walked into her room later that evening. It's done, he said, his voice calm but firm. Angela knows her place now. Sarah's heart swelled with relief, but she didn't know how long this fragile peace would last. Thank you, she whispered. For everything. Dominic gave her a soft smile. You don't have to thank me, Sarah. This is what I should have done from the start. But Sarah wasn't so sure. There were still many challenges ahead, many battles left to fight. But with Dominic by her side, she felt a glimmer of hope. The next morning, the staff seemed different. There were no more whispers behind her back, no more cold stares. People spoke to her more openly, and while she could still feel the tension in the air, it was as if a weight had been lifted from her shoulders. She knew Angela wasn't finished, that there would be more obstacles to overcome. But for now, she had a chance. She could breathe again. As Sarah walked through the mansion that day, she felt a new sense of determination. She wasn't going to let anyone, not even Angela, dictate her future. She was stronger than she had ever been, and with Dominic's support, she knew she could handle whatever came next. She wasn't just the maid anymore. She was someone who mattered. The days after the confrontation with Angela passed in an uneasy calm. Sarah's place in the mansion had been secured once again, but there was no denying the toll it had taken on her. She had fought so hard for her dignity, for her right to exist without fear of accusations or manipulation. Yet, the weight of the past few weeks lingered. Dominic's words and his promises still resonated in her mind, but there was still that sense of unease that wouldn't fully go away. She knew Angela wouldn't simply disappear, no matter how much Dominic intervened. It was only a matter of time before the next challenge arrived. One evening, as Sarah was finishing up her chores, she found herself in the garden, seeking a moment of peace. The lush greenery and the scent of blooming flowers usually helped calm her nerves. She walked slowly, allowing the quiet of the evening to settle over her. As she wandered through the garden, her thoughts drifted back to Dominic. It was hard to ignore the growing connection between them. He had been kind to her in ways she hadn't expected, showing her compassion, standing up for her when no one else would. She had never thought she would find someone like him in this world. Someone who cared. But even as she enjoyed the quiet moment, a nagging voice in the back of her mind reminded her of the dangers that still lurked. She wasn't safe yet. The peace she had fought for was fragile, and one wrong move could shatter it. She didn't know how much longer she could keep pretending everything was okay. That night, Dominic sought her out in the garden. He appeared as silently as ever, his presence commanding yet gentle. "Sarah," he said, his voice low but warm. "I was looking for you." Sarah turned, startled but relieved to see him. "I'm just getting some air," she replied, trying to smile despite the lingering tension. Dominic walked toward her, his steps slow and deliberate. He seemed to sense the restlessness that had taken root in her. "How are you holding up?" he asked, his concern evident in his eyes. Sarah paused for a moment, searching for the right words. I'm managing," she said carefully. "But there's always that feeling that things could change in an instant. Angela's not finished. I can feel it." Dominic stepped closer, his gaze never leaving hers. "You're right. Angela won't stop. But I'm not going to let her win. I've made it clear where I stand. And I'm going to protect you, Sarah. I won't let her tear us apart. His words were comforting, but they didn't erase the fear that still clung to Sarah's heart. I don't want to be a burden, she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. I don't want to feel like I'm relying on you all the time. Dominic reached out, taking her hand gently in his. You're not a burden, he said firmly. You're not relying on me. You're standing by me, and that's what matters. We're in this together. Sarah felt a wave of warmth wash over her at his words. The connection between them was undeniable now. It wasn't just about protection anymore. It was something deeper, something she couldn't quite define. She wanted to believe that everything would be okay, that the life she had built here wasn't as fragile as it felt. But the truth was, Angela's influence still loomed large, and there was only so much Dominic could do to shield her from the fallout. I just don't want to lose what I've worked for, Sarah admitted, her voice thick with emotion. I don't want to be forced out of here again, like I was before. Dominic's expression softened, and he squeezed her hand. You won't lose it, he said with conviction. I'll make sure of that. I won't let her take this from you, Sarah. I won't let anyone hurt you. For a moment, the weight of his words settled around them, and Sarah felt a sense of peace she hadn't felt in weeks. Perhaps, for the first time, she truly believed that Dominic would keep his promise. As the evening wore on, Sarah found herself in the library, organizing books and trying to push the worries from her mind. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was brewing, that there was another storm on the horizon. But, for now, she allowed herself a brief moment of solace, a break from the chaos that had defined her life in recent months. Just as she was finishing, she heard the familiar sound of footsteps approaching. Her heart skipped a beat, and she turned to see Dominic standing in the doorway. Sarah, he said softly, his voice steady but serious. There's something you need to know. I've been making arrangements. I can't keep you hidden forever, but we're going to take action before Angela can make her next move. I've spoken to the right people, and we'll handle this. Sarah's stomach twisted, the gravity of the situation settling back in. What do you mean? She asked, her voice laced with worry. Dominic stepped closer, his expression determined. I'm going to make sure that Angela can't do anything to harm you. I'm going to take this to the next level, Sarah. It's time we end this once and for all. Sarah nodded, feeling a mixture of relief and trepidation. The calm before the storm was over. It was time to confront Angela, to face whatever she had planned next. But Sarah wasn't afraid anymore. She had Dominic by her side, and together, they would fight to keep her place in the mansion. The days following Dominic's promise to protect Sarah felt like a strange, uneasy calm. While things had quieted down in the mansion, Sarah knew the danger wasn't over. Angela's relentless nature was not to be underestimated. The whispers had faded among the staff, but the threat still loomed in the background. Sarah kept her distance from everyone, focusing on her work, staying out of the spotlight, and waiting for Dominic to make the next move. Dominic had been reassuring, but Sarah knew Angela would not stop scheming. It wasn't just about her anymore. It was about power, about winning. One evening, as Sarah was heading to the kitchen to prepare dinner, she was stopped in the hallway by one of the butlers. He looked unusually serious. Sarah, Mr. Romano asked to see you in his office immediately, he said, his tone neutral. Sarah's heart skipped a beat. She hadn't expected this. She wasn't sure whether it was good or bad news, but the urgency in his voice made her anxious. She made her way to Dominic's office, her steps echoing in the quiet hallway. When she arrived, she knocked once before entering. Dominic was sitting at his desk, his face serious, but his eyes softened when he saw her. Sarah, come in, he said, motioning for her to sit. As she took her seat, Dominic stood and walked toward the window, gazing out at the mansion grounds for a moment before turning back to face her. We've reached a turning point, he said quietly. Sarah's pulse quickened. What do you mean? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Dominic's expression was grave. Angela is making her final play. She's gone behind my back and made deals with some of the people closest to me. She's trying to frame you, Sarah. She's trying to convince them that you're the one undermining everything I've built. She's telling them that you're working with other factions to take control. Sarah's stomach dropped. What? That's not true. You know I'm not involved in anything like that. Dominic nodded, his jaw tightening. I know, but she's powerful, and she's playing this game in a way that makes it hard for anyone to see the truth. I'm not going to let her destroy you, but I need to act fast. Sarah sat in stunned silence, her thoughts spinning. She had hoped Angela would be dealt with, but now it seemed like the situation had escalated beyond anything she could have imagined. "What do we do now?" she asked, her voice trembling. Dominic walked back to his desk, his hands resting on the surface as he leaned toward her. "I'm going to confront her directly. I've already made arrangements with some of my contacts. We're going to end this once and for all, but I need you to be strong, Sarah. Angela won't stop, but we can't let her control the narrative anymore." Sarah took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. "I don't want to be a part of this fight. I don't want to hurt anyone. I just want to be left alone, to do my job." Dominic's eyes softened, and he reached across the desk to gently take her hand. "I know, and you've done nothing wrong. This isn't about you. But if we don't act now, she'll destroy everything you've worked for. I won't let her do that." Sarah nodded, though her heart felt heavy. She knew Dominic was right, but the thought of conflict weighed on her. She didn't want to become a part of the chaos that seemed to consume this world. "I'll stand by you," she said quietly, though it was hard to find the courage in her voice. Dominic gave her a soft, reassuring smile. "That's all I need, Sarah. I'm not asking you to fight. I'm just asking you to trust me. We'll get through this together." The next few days passed in a blur of preparation. Dominic had set his plan into motion, and Sarah did everything she could to stay out of the way. She continued with her duties, keeping her head down and her mind focused on the work. She could feel the tension in the air, but she tried not to let it affect her. The mansion was on edge, but she remained steadfast, waiting for the inevitable confrontation. One afternoon, as Sarah was in the library organizing books, she heard the sound of footsteps approaching. She turned to see Dominic standing in the doorway. He looked at her for a moment before walking in, his face unreadable. "It's time," he said quietly. Sarah's stomach flipped. She knew what he meant. This was it. The final confrontation. "What happens now?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Dominic's expression softened. "We confront Angela, and we make it clear that this ends today. No more lies, no more games. She either steps back, or she faces the consequences." Sarah nodded, though. Her heart was racing. She wasn't sure what to expect, but she trusted Dominic. "I'm with you," she said, her voice steady. "Let's end this." Together, they walked toward Angela's quarters, where the showdown would take place. Sarah's thoughts were a whirlwind as she followed Dominic. She knew Angela wouldn't go down without a fight, but she also knew that with Dominic by her side, she had a chance to put an end to this nightmare once and for all. The final moment was upon them, and Sarah was ready. Whatever happened next, she wasn't going to let fear control her. She had already fought too hard to be silenced again. The day of the final confrontation had arrived. Sarah felt the weight of the moment on her shoulders as she followed Dominic down the hallway toward Angela's quarters. The air in the mansion felt heavier than usual, thick with tension. Everything had led to this. The last few months had been a whirlwind of fear, manipulation, and betrayal. But now, Sarah had a sense of clarity she hadn't felt before. She wasn't the same person she had been when she first entered the mansion. She had fought for her place, for her dignity, and now she was determined to put an end to Angela's schemes once and for all. As they reached Angela's door, Dominic paused and turned to Sarah. "Are you sure you're ready for this?" he asked, his voice soft but serious. Sarah nodded, her heart steadying. "I'm ready. Let's end this." Dominic placed a hand on her shoulder and gave her an encouraging smile. "No matter what happens, remember you're not alone in this. We're doing the right thing." He knocked on the door, his expression hardening as he did. The door opened a moment later, and there stood Angela, her face a mask of feigned surprise. "Dominic, Sarah," she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "What brings you to my door?" Dominic stepped forward, his stance commanding, his eyes cold. "Angela, we need to talk. It's time to end this. Your lies, your manipulation, it ends today." Angela's smile faltered for a split second, but she quickly regained her composure. "What are you talking about?" she asked, her voice deceptively calm. "I haven't done anything." "Don't play games, Angela," Dominic said, his voice low and steady. "You've been spreading lies about Sarah, trying to ruin her reputation, turning the staff against her. You've gone too far, and it stops now." Angela's eyes narrowed, the facade of politeness slipping away to reveal the anger beneath. "You think you can control everything, don't you?" she spat. "You think you can just throw me aside like a piece of trash?" Dominic stepped closer, his presence intimidating. This isn't about me controlling you, Angela. This is about protecting someone who doesn't deserve your cruelty. Someone who's been nothing but loyal. Angela scoffed, folding her arms across her chest. Loyal? Please. She's just a maid, Dominic. A nobody. She doesn't belong here. Sarah felt a rush of anger, but she stayed silent, knowing this moment wasn't about her emotions. This was about standing firm and making sure Angela understood the consequences of her actions. Dominic's voice was calm, but there was an undeniable authority in his tone. Sarah belongs here. She's earned her place. You, on the other hand, have used your position to manipulate, lie, and destroy. And I won't stand for it any longer. Angela took a step back, her eyes flicking between Dominic and Sarah, and for the first time, there was a hint of fear in her eyes. You're making a mistake, Dominic, she said, her voice trembling. I never meant to. Enough. Dominic cut her off, his voice fierce. You've made your choices, and now you'll face the consequences. I'm going to make sure the staff knows the truth, and you will have no power here anymore. For a moment, there was silence as Angela stood there, seething with fury. Then, slowly, she dropped her gaze, defeated. You can't do this, she whispered. You think you can just take everything from me? Dominic's gaze softened slightly, but his resolve remained firm. I'm not taking anything from you. You've already lost it all. Your lies have caught up with you. Angela didn't respond. She stood motionless, the realization sinking in. She had no more leverage, no more influence. The room was thick with the finality of the moment. You're free to leave now, Dominic said coldly, turning his back on her and walking toward the door. Pack your things and leave the mansion. I don't ever want to see you again. Angela's eyes were wide with disbelief, but she didn't argue. She simply turned and left, the door closing softly behind her. Sarah stood there, her heart pounding. It was over. Dominic had done it. He had taken control, and Angela's reign of manipulation had ended. She looked at Dominic, who was standing by the door, his expression unreadable. It's done, he said quietly. It's over. Sarah nodded, her emotions swirling. She didn't feel victorious. She didn't feel like she had won. What she felt was relief. The fear that had weighed on her for so long had finally been lifted. Angela was gone, and she was free to live her life without the constant threat of betrayal hanging over her head. As Sarah stepped into the hallway, she felt a lightness she hadn't known in months. The mansion, once a place of fear, now felt like a place of possibility. She had fought for her place, and now it was hers to keep. And for the first time in a long time, Sarah allowed herself to hope. There was a future ahead of her, one that was her own to shape. With Dominic's support, she could finally move forward, no longer haunted by the shadows of the past. The journey had been long, and at times, it had felt like it would never end. But now, as she stood beside Dominic, she knew that whatever came next, she was ready. Together, they had faced the storm, and now they could finally find peace.